everyone, it's Miss Neely. I wanted to teach you a song that I sang every day when I worked in a kindergarten classroom, and I thought you would enjoy it. Maybe you might know it. It's called 5 Green and Speckled Frogs. It goes like this. 5 green and speckled frogs sat on a bumpy log, eating the most delicious bugs. Yum, yum! One jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Then there were 4 green speckled frogs. Club, club. 4 green and speckled frogs sat on a bumpy log, eating the most delicious bugs. Yum, yum! One jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Now there were 3 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 3 green and speckled frogs sat on a bumpy log, eating the most delicious bugs. Yum, yum! One jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Then there were 2 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 2 green and speckled frogs sat on a bumpy log, eating the most delicious bugs. Yum, yum! One jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Now there was 1 green speckled frog. Glub, glub. 1 green and speckled frog sat on a bumpy log, eating the most delicious bugs. Yum, yum! He jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Now there were no green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. I hope you enjoyed it and you enjoy Mr. Sicking's lesson.
Hello, Athenaeum. This is Mr. Sicking. Perhaps some of you know me from Homework Club. Thank you for joining me today as we read A Finnish Tale of Humility. In Athenaeum, we often talk about virtue. Do you remember what humility is? Humility means placing others before ourselves and not bragging or promoting ourselves. It means doing our best just because it is our best, not because we receive praise or recognition. It essentially is knowing our limits and adhering to them. Today I'm going to share a story from the country of Finland. Finland is a northern European country near Norway and Sweden, along the Scandinavian peninsula. You may consult the map that I have posted up here. Every country, has its own traditions and tales, and often those stories help us to think about virtues and how we can be the best versions of ourselves, reminding us of the timeless truths that bind us together as human beings. So as I read this story, I would like you to think about who in this story shows humility and how that humility is rewarded. Let us begin. The Princess Mouse, a Finnish folk tale, as retold by Francesca Morgan. Once there were 2 brothers who were sons of a farmer. As they grew, it was time for them to marry. Their father said, "Boys, you have come of age, and it is time for each of you to find a wife. In our family, we have our own way of choosing a bride." The younger son, Mikko, listened with honor and respect to his father's request. But the older son haughtily replied, "I know, father, you've told us before. We must cut a tree down, and the way it lands is the direction in where we find our bride." The father nodded and told them they must walk in the direction that the tree pointed until they found a sweetheart. That was the tradition they would follow. The older son already had a sweetheart and also knew how to cut a tree to make it fall in the direction he wanted. That was his plan. The brothers went to cut their trees. Mikko did not have a sweetheart, so he thought he would try to cut a tree and aim it into the town. However, when he cut the tree, it did not land pointing towards the town, but towards the forest. His older brother laughed and teased him. "Oh, Miko, maybe you'll find a fox or a bear to marry." Miko ignored his brother's jest and went walking in the direction his tree pointed. Miko walked and walked. He walked for hours through the forest, not finding a single soul. Just as he was about to give up, he saw a little cottage. He went into the cottage, hoping to find his sweetheart. To his disappointment, there was no one in the cabin. The cabin had been deserted. But as he turned to leave, Miko said, "I guess this was a waste of my time." But then suddenly, he heard a small voice say, "Maybe not." He turned back again to see who spoke. On the old table was a little furry mouse. "Did you say something?" he asked the mouse. The mouse replied, "Why don't you tell me your name and what you came looking for?" Miko, a respectful young man, felt the polite thing to do was to answer, even if it was a little mouse talking. He said, "My name is Miko, and I came looking for my sweetheart." "I'll be your sweetheart," squealed the little mouse. "But you're only a mouse," said Miko. "Mice can still be special, and I can still love you faithfully, Miko. Come, feel my soft fur," replied the mouse. Miko felt her fur with one finger, and it felt like velvet. She sang to him while he petted her fur. Miko had found no one else, and she was a wonderful little mouse. "All right," he said, "you can be my sweetheart." "You won't be sorry," said the little mouse. Miko wasn't sure about that, but he kept stroking her velvet fur and smiled. Miko returned home to his brother and father. His brother was proudly boasting of his sweetheart with golden hair and rosy cheeks. When Miko came in the door, his brother, observing Miko did not bring home a sweetheart, began to laugh at him and asked, "And where is your sweetheart, Miko? Did you find one with a nice fur coat?" Miko didn't want to admit his sweetheart was a mouse. So he just told them his sweetheart has a coat of velvet like a princess. His brother stopped laughing. The father then told the boys they would need to ask their sweetheart to weave a cloth to test their skills. The next morning, the boys set out to their sweethearts to give them the request. When Miko reached the cabin, the little mouse jumped up and down, squealing, "Miko, you're here! Is today the day of our wedding?" "No, it is not," replied Miko. He stroked the little mouse's fur and explained, "My father has asked that our sweethearts weave a cloth to test their skill. But you are only a mouse. How could you weave any cloth?" "I may be only a mouse, but I am also your sweetheart. You must be tired from your journey. Take a rest, my Miko." The mouse sang to him, and Miko fell asleep. As soon as he was in a deep sleep, the little mouse clapped her little soft paws. Hundreds of mice appeared from the holes and cracks in the walls. She ordered them to find and bring pieces of the finest flax. The mice scurried off and came back each with a thread of flax. They all worked together on the weaving machine to make cloth out of the flax. Some were feeding the thread in while the little mouse and others would push the petals. They stuffed the fabric into a nutshell. The mice scurried away as Miko awoke. The little mouse gave the nutshell to Miko and sent him back to his father. Miko had no idea what his father would want with a nutshell. When Miko returned home, his father was looking over the cloth his brother's sweetheart made. "Nice, it's strong and fairly even. Good enough for simple folk like us," said the father. Miko shyly handed his father the nutshell. His brother burst laughing. "You asked for cloth and your sweetheart gave you a nutshell? Ha 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 ha." Miko felt embarrassed. The father opened the nutshell and looked closely inside. He saw a piece of cloth made of the finest linen. As he pulled on it, it kept coming out, yard by yard. They were all astonished, especially Mikko. "Surely Mikko has found the finest weaver for a sweetheart," proclaimed his father. "Go fetch your sweethearts tomorrow, and you will both be married." The next morning Mikko went back to the cabin. The mouse saw him and squealed, "Mikko, is today the day of our wedding?" Sadly, Mikko said, "Yes, but how am I to take a mouse home to marry? Everyone will laugh at me." The mouse responded, "You're right, Mikko. Everyone will laugh, but that doesn't matter. What do you think?" Mikko thought how the mouse loved him and cared for him. He responded, "Let them laugh. You are a fine sweetheart." The mouse clapped her little paws, and 4 rats came out, pulling a nutshell like a carriage. Mikko placed his sweetheart in the carriage as though she were a queen. Off ran the rats as the mouse sang of her happiness. Mikko ran after them to catch up. He was filled with excitement over his upcoming marriage, for, even though he knew he would be mocked for his choice, the little mouse would be a good, kind wife to him, and he respected her for her virtue. They arrived at the spot near the river where the brothers were to have their weddings. As the mouse pulled up to the spot, Mikko's brother saw them. He was outraged. He swiftly kicked the rats and mouse into the river. "What have you done to my sweetheart?" yelled Mikko, distraught as he watched the carriage disappear. "Are you crazy? It was a mouse!" yelled his brother. "You have killed her! She was really my sweetheart and I loved her!" Mikko went to attack his brother, but the shouts of his father stopped him. "Mikko, look!" Everyone turned and looked down the river as 4 black horses and a carriage emerged from the water. The people gasped in astonishment as the horses rode up to the spot where Mikko was. A beautiful princess opened the door of the carriage and said, "Mikko, aren't you going to help me down?" Mikko was stunned. "Were you the little mouse?" Smiling, the princess said, "I was. An evil witch had cast a spell on me, and the only way it could be broken was to have one brother that wanted to marry me, and one brother who wanted to kill me." Mikko's father gave them a grand wedding. When Mikko and his princess bride returned to the cabin in the woods, it was no longer a cabin, but a castle with hundreds of servants. Later, when Mikko and the princess had sons, can you guess how they chose their brides? Now, having read the story, what are our final thoughts, and what can it teach us about the lesson of humility? First of all, we might ask ourselves, what is the opposite of humility? I think we often call, what's its opposite? The opposite vice of the virtue humility is pride. Which character do you think acted in a prideful manner? Now, especially between Mikko and his brother. Mikko and his brother had very different ways of acting. But Mikko, unlike his brother, was willing to put aside his pride and act rightly. His humility, in doing so then, was in fact rewarded with the gift of a lovely and kind princess, with whom he could share his life with. I hope you enjoyed this story from Finland. Please tell me your favorite part in the comments below. If this story inspires you to draw a picture, please send it in an email, and I will share it with your friends on Facebook.